it's Michael from Stellar Care. Today I'm going to show you how to paint some models. Today I got some models from the dollar store actually. These are just little plastic Army Men figures, as you can see. And they're all only $1 for this whole set. So if I make a mistake, it's not a big deal, okay? First things first, you're going to want to primer your stuff. Today I used P3 primer. This is actually kind of an expensive primer, but it's what I had on hand. The reason I like this primer though, it has a nozzle on it that's helps spread out the primer evenly. And that's usually what you want, a nice thin primer. You don't want it too thick. You can also use a paint-on primer. That works too. I generally would, if when I'm doing terrain, I don't usually go for a P3. I might use like a Army paint or something a little cheaper. Okay, let's go over some of the other things we got here. I have some clippers here. Clippers, these are used for cleaning up the models. You might have like little burrs or something that are on the model you want to clean up. Or sometimes if you have them in pieces and you need to glue them together, you got to take them off the spur. Okay, of course they have different paint brushes. The different paints I'm using, I got a texture paint, base paint, layer paint, and a wash. So let's go over the differences of some of these paints here. So a texture paint is very thick and it has a little bit of grit to it. And so if you're using it for something that should have grit, like a sand or something, it's a good choice. So that's what I use for the first coat. The difference between a base like these and a layer like this is the ratio of pigment to the painting solution. So a base has more pigment to it. So it's a more of a darker color or more of a thicker, denser color, and the layer is a little thinner. Okay, and then a wash is meant to kind of go into the crevices of a model and darken the crevices. Okay, we have a cup of water. So here's a safety tip. While you're painting, it's a good idea not to have anything that you're drinking here because you might mistake that for your paint water and you don't want to drink that by accident and get sick. So while you're doing this, I suggest that if you need a drink, just to get up and get a drink and then come back. And don't bring any drinks back with you. That way you're not spilling anything and you're not confusing your drink with the paint water. We also have this soap here. This is a soap to clean off the brush. Once I'm done painting, I want to clean that color off so I can use another color. And I just use a little napkin to dab it. You won't see, I don't use palettes. Some people use palettes to thin the paints. I kind of thin the paint with the brush itself. It's just a technique I developed. I brought an example of a finished model so you can see kind of my ability level. This is something I painted a while ago. I was in the Armored Cavalry, so tanks have a special place in my heart. But today we're going to do some of these. This is like a barrier you would make with sandbags, and these are little posts for flags. There's some flags you can put in there. So I use those just to kind of show the difference of the process here. So like I said, I chose this texture paint. It's called Sterling Battlemire. It's from Citadel, and I painted this one. And as you can see, it's a darker brown. Anytime you're painting something, you want to start darker and work your way to lighter. So eventually, like I said, I wanted it to kind of be a stone color. So I'm going to work my way to that stone color. That's what we're going to do today. So I used 2 coats for this one. Once I got that nice and good, I used this color as an in-between color. This is a base XV88. It's kind of a yellow-brown. And we're going for kind of more of a desert motif here. So I went there. And I just did 1 coat on that because that's not going to be the final color. That's just kind of an in-between color. And so after I did all that, we get to this. Now I've washed. And what I've washed is I just went in between the crevices here. Now this isn't a final product. I know it looks a little sloppy and it's okay. Wash is very thin. And it's meant to kind of just, gravity just pulls it. Okay? But what it does is it helps differentiate between the pieces of sandbag for me when I'm painting this other part. So now I'm going to take kind of this isn't a fine detail. This is what is this is a 20-0, A. I really don't know the difference, but you can see the type of tip I'm using. It's not too small, not too big. And what we're going to do is I'm just going to paint each one of these bricks here. Okay. I'm going to get a little bit of paint on my brush here. Now you can sometimes like I shake a little bit. I like to hold my arms against the table here while I'm doing it. You can also interlock your hands. Some people do that. Everyone develops their own ways of doing things. Okay, and we're just going to paint this. And you see, maybe this looks a little gray or white, but once you put it over that yellow brown, it retains some of that yellow brown underneath it. And so that's why we kind of work our way to that lighter color. And what you kind of need to experiment with things, with colors before you know exactly what you want. And after I do this, if I don't like the color or I think it needs to be a little darker, it's really easy to go over it with a wash and that will stain it. And it'll make it a little bit darker. And I might end up doing that just to kind of show that process once we're all done here. I probably won't, this is going to take a little bit longer than I really conceived. I've never made a video like this before. So I might just paint like half of it and then go to the next step. Now, of course, you want them, anytime you're doing these layers, you have to make sure that they're dry before you go to the next step. So in between each layer, you're going to need to let it sit there for a good 30 minutes, especially before doing a wash. If you're going to do a wash, the paint needs to be dry. Otherwise, it'll mess up the paint and it'll bring the paint all together in one big mess. So as you can see, I'm just painting the bricks, trying not to paint those parts that were washed. If you do, it's not a big deal. You can rewash them, like I said. And you want to make this look as realistic as possible. So in reality, things aren't, stacked perfectly, especially sandbags. They're going to have a little bit of mess to them. But that's what we're going for here. And how I hold the brush is kind of like a pencil or a pen. I have seen some people do something like this. Whatever you're comfortable with is fine. And this is very relaxing. It's very good. When you're doing this, you can think of things. You can reflect on life, your day. It's something really good to get your hands moving and have them busy. I believe Carl Jung said that physical stress is the answer to mental stress. So making yourself do something physically demanding helps alleviate some of your stress of the day. Okay, so that's one of the reasons I always suggest art or some kind of exercise if you're not feeling very well that day, just mentally. Consider that. It doesn't have to be painting, it could be anything, but this is something that I enjoy. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, I think I could show you the next technique just with that. So right now I'm going to let that dry. Normally I would do a second coat before I'm about to do what I'm going to show you, but just for the purposes of this video, I want to give you a quick tutorial on dry brushing before we go too far. Okay, so we're going to hold that for a sec. While that's drying though, I can show you this tank. Now this tank, I'm doing something different. I had applied a coat of gray, so I primered it black like this guy, and now we're going for a gray. And the reason I did gray is because eventually I'm going to get, if I can find it in here, a silver color, so a metallic color on some of the pieces. Anytime you do metallic or any kind of metal color, you want a base color that's close to put underneath it. Otherwise, because the metal paints are kind of thin, it won't look right. So in order for this to look like metal, I need to have gray underneath it, or something like a gray. And I need to do another coat before I can even do that. So while I'm letting that dry, I'll go ahead and show a little bit of how you do a base coat here. Because with a base coat, you know, you want a little bit bigger brush because you don't want such a detailed brush. So here's a thicker brush. You know what? Let's go with this one. Not too big, but not too small. And you're going to you wet the brush, and you just get a little bit of that paint. And I'm gonna put another thin layer of this on there. Okay. And you see, I'm not really being detailed. I'm just kind of applying the paint in a nice thin, even coat. And that way it'll take on the metallic paint without looking strange. And I don't really know how to tell you that until you've seen it, but just trust me that you want a gray coat underneath metal. And you always want a base coat in general, just so you have a nice solid level of paint on a model. And a base coat, like I said, has more pigment to it than the layer paints. Now you can base a paint with layer paints if you need to. You would just have to do more coats in order for it to last, especially if you're doing some kind of miniature gaming with this stuff. You're going to be playing with it, have your hands on it constantly. You want it to last a while. There's also some finishing coats you can do to keep paints good. We can go over that in another tutorial. You always want to make sure you get all angles, every crevice. And because this is a toy and not a model, it actually moves around a little bit, which is interesting. It's kind of cool. But it's plastic, and these paints are meant for plastic. Now, the paints I'm using are a water base. You can use enamel. I recommend the water base because they come off a lot easier once you get them on your fingers. And also wear like an old t-shirt while you're painting. That way you're not ruining your clothing. Okay. So that's just kind of how I do a base coat. Of course, I'm going to do the undercarriage as well. You see, the paints can spill here. Thankfully, there's not much left in this one, so that's why I have a nice mat here to protect the table. I'm going to have something to protect the table before you do this stuff. Yeah, something got stuck to it. Pull that sucker off. Okay. Now, when you're doing this, if you get too much paint, like, you know what, I'll make a mistake. I put a lot of paint there. Oh, that's too much. I don't want that much paint. What you can do, clean off your brush as completely as possible, and then you just take your brush and you just soak it up, okay? Just soak up that paint. And you know, crisis averted. You're fine. No problem there. You take out the paint, you can spread it around to the other parts of the model. Okay, so that's one way to fix that mistake. And you're going to make mistakes on your first model. Don't let that discourage you. Personally, I learn more from my mistakes than I do from my success. So when I make a mistake, that's just an opportunity for me to learn something new. Just take a deep breath and move on, okay? Okay, well, I think I've shown you pretty much how to accomplish a good base coat. And so let me show you this again. This is that soap. Just to get all that gray off there, I'm going to use a little bit of that soap. Put it back in here. Let's sit there. I'll cover this. You got to cover the soap though, because it could dry out just like your paints. Same thing with the paints. I'm done with that gray. I'm going to snap it. Make sure it don't spill. Okay, take that brush out. And as you can see, there's no more gray on there at all. That little bit of paint soap, brush cleaner, took all that pigment off. Okay. So let me just kind of touch that. Yeah, it feels pretty dry. Okay, so I use this color. But now I want to make this color kind of pop a little bit more. I want to make the edges pop. In order to do that, I'm going to take a lighter color. This is a bone color. Bone and stone usually work pretty good together. You can also use a white or a light gray. I'm going to take a dry brush. I don't think I've pulled out a good dry brush. I'm going to find a good dry brush here. Here's one I can use. Okay, so a dry brush is something that kind of has a little bit looser bristles. Okay, and with this, I'm going to get a fresh piece of napkin. I'm just going to, and when you dry brush, you really don't want to wet the paint or the brush. You want it to be dense but light, and I'll show you. So you're gonna just take the brush, you're just gonna dab it just a little bit. See, this is way too much. It looks like a little bit, but I'm actually gonna paint on this to get it to the color I want. Okay, and I think that's still just a little bit. You just want to light, and then what you do is you just take this and you go against the grain, and you just kind of lightly paint against the grain here. And what you're going to do is you're going to catch those edges. So I'm going to bring it closer to the camera here. And I hope the camera can show you what I'm doing here. I can also do it against this darker color, so maybe it'll pop more. But you see how I'm just making the edges pop with a lighter color. And depending on what you're going for, you can go either way. Maybe you do want it that dark, and then that'll be light enough. Now, once you dry brush, you can always wash over it if you need to darken it. But I always suggest you can always add more dry brush. It's harder to take it away. So always, if you're not sure, start out with the lightest amount of the dry brush before you apply it. Okay, and that came out okay. You know, like I said, normally I would do another coat of that other color before I did this, but I wanted to show you some techniques. I'll have this finished before my next video, and then we'll look at it and see what we think. And maybe we'll move on to the tank next. Okay, so you guys all have a good day, and I don't know if we're going to have comments for these videos or not, or how we're doing this, but if you guys have questions, I'll answer them, and maybe I'll see you at a day program. Bye, guys.